welcome back. We've been tracing a history of the occult tradition, occultism. We just started in the ancient world. We spent a bit of time on Hermeticism coming out of Egypt as a Greek-Egyptian collaboration. And we looked at its renewal its coming into prominence at the time of the Italian Renaissance. We noticed the advent of Christian Hermeticism and Christian Kabbalism, which really was unknown up until that point, because most of the underground streams, the streams that have to do with esoteric and occult teachings, and they don't mean the same thing, they had expressed themselves through heresies and heterodox movements in the early years of Christianity in the Dark and Middle Ages, and they remained on the margins, like the Bogomils and the Cathars and Albigensians, Cathars, and other groups who were capturing aspects but were actually getting a lot wrong at the same time. So they had to remain marginalised and kept at bay so that they wouldn't deleteriously influence the orthodox development of Christian doctrine. But by the time of the Renaissance, these two streams, what you might call traditional Christianity and the occult stream, which includes Hermeticism and Kabbalah, essentially, you could think of it as Hermetic Kabbalah or Kabbalistic Hermeticism. This was merged. So you had figures in the Renaissance that were pioneers in being Christian Hermetic Kabbalists. And this had a profound effect on the culture. And most people see the Renaissance as a resurgence of humanism in the revival of the learnings of ancient Greece and Rome, but it was also a resurgence of Hermeticism. Then we went through the development of organisations as well, like the Rosicrucians and the Illuminati and the Freemasons, and they were important because they're going to influence the West. And as I said at the beginning, the provenance of the occult tradition is the Western world. It's sometimes known as the Western mystery tradition. And then we get fraternities developing, like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the French occult revival, where notably we see a set of playing cards, the tarot, being taken and used as a vehicle for the deeper esoteric and occult truths. A man who was a linchpin in doing this was Eliphas Levi. We also alluded to Antoine Court de Gébelin, who had an inspiration that a lot of these cards were meant to convey archetypes and motifs that were known about in the ancient Egyptian mysteries as well. We saw the rise of the Theosophical movement, and originally the Theosophical movement was very Eastern in its orientation. Now, it purports to be universal. Its motto is, "There is no religion higher than truth." And I mean, since the Renaissance, people in the West have been talking about a prisca theologia, or perennial philosophy, which lies behind and at the foundation of every world religion. It's sort of like a pure primeval wisdom teaching or theology, knowledge of God, of ultimate reality, which can express itself in different externalities for different cultures and peoples through so-called exoteric religion. Religion that is conducted for mainstream believers, for the masses, and has a set of experts or authorities that guard doctrine and define official teaching. Now, that would be fine, but what is the language of this Prisca Theologia? Because as soon as you put it in a particular language, it's already got an external, it's got a cloaking, hasn't it? It's already starting to be, it's already attracting some sort of cultural accretion. And with the Theosophical Society, there was a lot of employment of Buddhist and Hindu terms, and that's why some people say that the Theosophy was a kind of explosion of esoteric Buddhism and esoteric Hinduism, especially esoteric Buddhism, which was then brought back into the Western world in a big missionary effort. We have to understand that just as there have been missionary efforts by the Christian churches, let's say, and Islam, to take religion to the Far East, China, Japan, India, so too there have been efforts of a missionary nature that have come from the East to the West. One of these was when Swami Vivekananda addressed the that big international convention in Chicago in 1893. He was sent there by his guru, Sri Ramakrishna, to talk about an age in which the different faiths, traditions could dialogue with each other and so on. He was certainly the star of that conference. Paramahamsa Yogananda, who came from a long lineage of Hindu yogis, came to the West, set up base in America and established the Self-Realization Fellowship. The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who had a big influence on the Beatles, he popularized transcendental meditation. There are others, if you think about, and the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, he had his ashram in Pune in India, but he established a huge commune in the state of Oregon in the United States. And eventually he was basically chased out of the country, but he had a profound impact on the culture, not just on the west coast of the United States, but there was a whole national reaction to him. And sometimes these missionary efforts are more peaceable than at other times, and sometimes they bring up stark differences. Deepak Chopra, for instance, started as a doctor, as an endocrinologist, but then he revived the Vedic wisdom and started teaching it combined with his scientific knowledge, and has become a kind of new age guru. So just as clear Eastern missionaries have come across to the West and promoted, well, the Eastern traditions, and there's a lot of mysticism, as I said, in the Eastern traditions, mystics. The Theosophical Society was kind of doing that, even though it came from the West. It was begun by this Russian noblewoman.
Alice Bailey wasn't she one of the founders of the Theosophical?
She wasn't a founder, but she was the next generation. It was Madame Helena Blavatsky.
Oh, that's right.
That started it, but she came from the West. She came from Russia,
yeah.
But she ended up going to India and promoting the Indian approach to spirituality back into the West. So a kind of missionary from the East. Alice Bailey sort of flourished about half a century after Blavatsky, but she too was under the Theosophical aegis. There were others in between, like Annie Besant, very influential women in the Theosophical movement.
Especially for that time.
But because there were a lot of people in the West who thought, well, okay, the ageless wisdom notion is a good one. We do want to see the commonalities between the faith traditions, but what we're having fed back to us there's a lot of it in Sanskrit, and a lot of it is importing all of the cultural baggage or the cultural framework and milieu of the Vedic religions and the Buddhist religion. Is there not something that fits more closely to the needs of Europeans? And so we see Alice Bailey, for one, trying to express theosophy in less Indian dress, if I can put it that way, and in more kind of, in terms of universal principles, as she even brings in the Christ consciousness, right? It's not the same as traditional belief in Jesus Christ as Saviour, but more so as the leading teacher, the world teacher, Christ, who taught a different way, and this way, this consciousness that Christ possessed would be disseminated through humanity. It would become the future of the race. So she was moving in a westerly direction, just in invoking the name of Jesus Christ. Another one that I mentioned, Rudolf Steiner, was trying to do the same when he broke off from the Theosophical Society and started the Anthroposophical Society. He truly believed that there was a unique place for Jesus Christ in the scheme of things, and that the sacrifice on Calvary had cosmic repercussions. And yet Steiner adhered to the idea of a perennial philosophy, like the early theosophists. He believed that truth could be found in all the religious traditions, but there was a unique role for what his version of Christianity, he called it esoteric Christianity, but his version of Christianity was inimical to traditional, organized, ecclesiastical Christianity, such as been known in the West for 2,000 years. Then somebody who began with Steiner in the Anthroposophical Society, although they didn't meet, this man who wrote this enigmatic volume, which we should talk about sometime, it was called Meditations on the Tarot. He was a brilliant esotericist. Again, like a kind of polymath genius like Steiner or Gurdjieff, hailed from Russia like Blavatsky, but became a convert to Catholicism at the end of the Second World War, and was looking for a rapprochement between the esoteric Christianity, which held the occult and the esoteric stream, and mainstream traditional Christianity. So Valentin Tomberg wanted to take it one step further. This is what makes him a kind of pioneering figure in a way. And whilst he died in the 70s, and his major opus came out in the early 80s, but having died in the 70s, he was just seeing the beginnings of the New Age movement. It wasn't called the New Age movement then, and he couldn't have identified it in all its complexity as we can today. And I think he was minded to make sure that people who were attracted to these different streams of spirituality for good reason were not lost to religion. They didn't set up an artificial barrier and an artificial antagonism to mainstream religion. Those who remained within the anthroposophical fold of Rudolf Steiner did. It was like, you can either have this or that, but there was to be no rapprochement between esoteric Christianity, so-called, and exoteric Christianity, so-called. Valentin Tomberg is unique in that respect and is a kind of pioneer of a middle way, a mediating way. And we'll no doubt have more to say about him, because in many respects, I think that the program that we're trying to put out through this channel is to build on that work and to take it to the next level. So, this New Age movement that he didn't see flower, what is it? It's a movement of eclectic and therapeutic spirituality. Every time you go and get some Reiki, you're participating in the New Age movement. Crystal healing, well, that's New Age too. You go for a tarot reading, that's New Age. You join a yoga school, you learn to do asanas and pranayama, that's become New Age. Of course it's ancient, but it's been brought back and packaged as something for everybody. For, no matter where you hail from, you can do yoga. You can do feng shui. Of course it's ancient and it's come out of the Chinese culture, but it doesn't stop Westerners or Southerners or whoever from learning about feng shui and practicing it. That has become incorporated into the New Age movement.
Especially if it works.
Yeah, especially if it works, if you see results in your life. Energetic healing, music, sound healing, color therapy. You can think of very, very many modalities which could all be classified as New Age. You feel like a kahuna massage, go down to the local clinic. That's part of New Age, and yet this modality came out of Hawaii, out of the Polynesian culture. And indeed, people learn about Kabbalah or Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, and that's come out of the Jewish culture, and yet it's become universalized. A lot of stars in Hollywood like to think of themselves as practicing Kabbalah, and they wear a little red band around their wrist, and Madonna was a famous example of this. A lot of the folks in LA. So where Hollywood is, there's quite an intense interest in all of this sort of thing. Personal transformation, personal enlightenment. You see, the New Age movement really took off from 1962 with the establishment of two beachheads. One in Big Sur, California, called Esalen, and they still have workshops and retreats and lots of things going there today. California is the home, really, of the New Age movement.
Yeah, it is.
And the other big place was Findhorn, Scotland, where they implemented growing practices and produced huge vegetables, but they also had a very esoteric universalist ethic that they ran their communities by. Now, 1962 was also the year that the environmentalist movement began. Think about that, with the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, a very seminal work. I haven't read it. I hope to get around to having a look at that sometime. Apparently had an enormous impact, launched the environmental movement. So what are the chances? This new age comes together with environmentalism, and in that year, 62, the Beatles arise and the Beach Boys arise. And I've already alluded to the Beatles because they were big purveyors of what the Eastern missionary,
Especially
Maharishi,
the Beatles.
yeah,
They were right into it.
yeah, My Sweet Lord, George Harrison and all of that,
Yeah.
Hare Krishnas. So, in other words, if you were born and grew up, if you were born in the, either a late boomer, but more so Gen X, the millennials or Gen X and then the millennials, Gen Y, and then the Zoomers, you just completely awash with the New Age movement. You see evidence of it everywhere. You see wind chimes at people's houses. This has come out of Chinese culture. It's to repel the bad chi, or the bagwas on their doors. Or you go down to the local crystal shop or the New Age bookstore and you can get books on self-healing, self-improvement. And in many ways, it's been a big boon. It's opened people's minds to the rich spiritual diversity on this planet. That's what it's done. The other thing you need to remember is that, and these are points I've touched on in other videos, I don't have the references with me to refer you to them, but I did mention that in 1962, there was a huge council of the Catholic Church called the Second Vatican Council in Rome later in that year. And most people regard it as an attempt to find a rapprochement and an accommodation between traditional Christianity and the modern world. And when you consider that so much of the modern world has been shaped by these heterodox, eclectic, therapeutic practices that have mushroomed up in the New Age, what we are looking at here is an attempt of two traditions within the global religious heritage to understand each other better and to work with each other and to cross-pollinate. This was the time when the world had to find a different way, because remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? It was going on about the same time as the Second Vatican Council. There could have been nuclear devastation there. And Kennedy and Khrushchev had a very tense time in mediating this, and it led to a peaceful resolution, but the installation of the hotline so that the President of the United States could just pick up the phone and speak directly to the leader of the Soviet Union. The power elite at the time realised that you can't just go on making enemies and being in a state of Cold War, because that can lead to the destruction of the whole world. So it's time for dialogue. It's time to get to know the other side better. And it's time for a way forward for the whole of humanity. And these were important developments. I also mentioned in a previous video that because of the precession of the equinoxes, at the December solstice, December the 21st, which is a summer solstice in the southern hemisphere and a winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the sun will be positioned against the background of fixed stars. And there's one time in the 26,000 years cycle where the sun is lined up with the center of our galaxy. Now, this may just be a coincidence. Some New Agers see a lot of significance in this cosmic alignment. But the degree the single degree that the sun traverses, where it is most closely aligned to the center of the Milky Way galaxy at the December solstice, is really the 72-year window between 1962 and 2034. And so much is happening in this window. We're all living in this window. We've seen the advent of space travel, haven't we? By 2034, not only have we've already gone to the moon.
Oh, there's a bit of question mark.
Okay, are we going to be moon landing deniers?
No, I'm not.
Well, we've got rockets up there at least, right? You do believe that. No, and most people believe that we've gone to the moon. And by the end of the decade, or by the early next decade, we could be starting colonization of other planets, maybe Mars.
Mars, here's a big one.
And I think Elon Musk has plans to do that. So what a period in human history.
Yeah.
Where we leap from the terrestrial to the extraterrestrial, where we migrate, where we can spread the civilization of Earth outwards. I hope it's not the expense of botching up this planet, ruining this planet, fighting each other to death, or making this uninhabitable, which is a theme in certain movies like Interstellar. The Earth becomes a kind of dust bowl and they have to find another planet to live on.
So let's go to Mars.
Well, they didn't go to Mars. They went through a wormhole into a distant galaxy looking for planets. This film was made 10 years ago, and it starred Matthew McConaughey. He was the explorer who was sent out to find other planets that could support habitable life. It's a good movie, good science fiction movie, Christopher Nolan film. So what am I saying? That not only have we gone up into space in this 72-year window, and it's 72 years that it takes for the sun in its precessional movement to traverse 1 degree of the zodiac. So I'm saying, like, we're in this tight orb of 1 degree lined up with the center of the galaxy. And incidentally, it takes light 26,000 years to travel from our solar system to the center of the galaxy, which is very interesting. It's another very interesting synchronicity. So if the cycles, the heavenly cycles, are connected with development, evolutionary development on this planet, cultural development, there could be quite a significance in that. What else is happening? Well, something really big is happening, isn't there? We've had the advent of the internet.
Massive.
We have a digital communications network that engirdles the globe. It's like a brain and a nervous system. And the hardware is everybody's computer, everybody's device, everybody's smartphone. And then you've got the cloud, you've got the internet, the World Wide Web. It's like the mind of the planet. It's there, and all the public discourse is there, and we can talk to each other, and it's just become, as they say, a global village. That's new. That's new. And it's part of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Because this dawning, if an age is 2160 years, this dawning can take centuries, and I believe it has. I believe that the dawning has been taking place, and there was a reboot in the 60s. So there you have it. The new age is considered to be an epoch, a time in our cycles of history and evolution. It's a time not just of leaving the old behind, and this is part of the danger of the new age which Valentin Tomberg was anticipating. Because this big cohort of people that we call spiritual but not religious, they don't want to be part of going to church or going to mosque or synagogue or temple. They don't want to be formally enrolled in religion, and yet they want to be able to craft their own spiritual path. They want to decide whether they want to meditate, do yoga, do Tai Chi, just take their own idiosyncratic path, decide whether there is an ultimate mystery to go for, and then go for it in the way that they want. And that's new, and that's revolutionary, and it's exciting in a way, and it is attached to the flywheel of the occult tradition. I hope I've made that point clear in this series of talks, that it's the occult tradition more than anything else that has powered this, and that we now see the expression of in the New Age. In the 19th century, it was about societies and brotherhoods and secret fraternities with rituals and belonging to an elite. But especially with America's influence and California's influence in particular, now it's time for the individual to do their own thing. Yes, and to be an occultist, manifestation, create the life that you want. Because the practice of these ideas leads to the whole belief that you can manifest your destiny. And it all goes back to Hermes, Trismegistus in ancient Egypt. The universe is mental. The Creator thought this universe up. You have a divine spark within you. You can create your own universe. It all goes back to there.
Wow.
And it's not only does it influence New Ages, it influences mainstream religionists, like the prosperity gospel in Christianity. You're meant to have more and be more, and all of this. You can manifest. It's become a big word, hasn't it?
It's all about manifestation.
Right. Now, Tomberg feared, and I'm concerned too, that if it makes organised, this is all great, but if it makes organised religion the enemy, it's not going to end very well, because they'll be missing a very important ingredient about to do with our humanity and our moral value system. And so we have to be very discerning when it comes to occultism. We have to ask in particular, because whether you look at the mainstream religions, the Messiah is the center of the spiritual universe. A Christian would say Christ is the center of the spiritual universe. All things are centered on him. But even Alice Bailey's version of theosophy and Rudolf Steiner's version of anthroposophy, Christ somehow was kind of at the center of the universe too. He came for us all somehow. It was the suffer and die on the cross to set us free, and then was resurrected on the third day. That's more the traditional belief. But the New Age version is that he's the great world teacher. He's the teacher of teachers. He comes to give a Christ consciousness. And in the age of the water bearer, Aquarius, that consciousness will be poured out on the masses. Maybe both are true. Maybe both are true. Why should we set one up against the other? Have I made sense, Belinda?
Absolutely. To me, you have.
All right. Well, in that case, maybe I should leave it at that. See you next time.